Here's the thing about it is Dr. Bob was creeping up and down these streets.
Yeah, he was.
So, this is where it all began.
It all began.
Ann's Gardens are alive and well today. That's a reflection of Ann, her beauty on the inside and out.
And Bill, who calls her the mother of AA. Hello everyone, my name is Dolly and I'm an alcoholic. Welcome to Akron, Ohio and to Dr. Bob's home.
My name's Harmon. I'm an alcoholic and welcome to the best location in the nation. 855 Ardmore Avenue. 1, 2, 3, we got them.
4, 5, 11, 12. My God, there's 12 steps.
Now, this, like I said, is monumental in itself. It's prestigious not only for the whole world, it is for Dr. Bob's home. That is a very elite status, and it's kicked us to the level where everything inside the home is relevant to when the Smiths were living here. Any things that are relevant, Mayflower Hotel, St. Thomas Hospital, so on and so forth. That's why we have the house next door, and that's why we have 122. But everything in the house is this is the Smiths' home.
Yes, and if I may interject, it says, and what it says, the national significance for its central role in the establishment of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that doesn't mean that just drunk sobered up. That means families were restored. That means that the Smiths' contribution to humankind.
Yes, I mean
that to me is just what a central role in our world.
Well, this is what we're talking about. It's a century-old home. The structure of it isn't special. It's what happened inside that is special.
Absolutely.
Stuff is stuff, and it's important, but it's the spirit of what happened,
Well,
and that's why we're
here.
here.
We want to show them what
Welcome
happened
home.
in this home.
This is your home.
This is our home. It's everyone's home. Welcome.
Welcome. Absolutely beautiful. Let's go home.
Let's go home. Come on, Chairman.
We want to say, welcome
Welcome home.
home. And you know that old saying, there's no place like home. There's no place like home. So here we are in the living room, in what we were talking about before, that every room in the house or the home plays a significant part of Alcoholics Anonymous, and without every single room in here, we would not be here today. So, in particularly the living room, if we can maybe show some of the things that we have.
Some original items here, which are, we're so blessed to have them. They've come back home. Boy, Annie loved music, didn't she? Over here.
Yes, that was their source of entertainment, and also their source of information back in the day. That was it, and that is beloved Annie above the radio. And yes, we have
One of
what
Dr.
they would
Bob's
listen
favorite,
to. Oh yeah.
the song. They were happy, weren't they?
Yeah, and they were just ordinary people like you and I, and God used them to do extraordinary things, and that's the essence. They weren't saints, they weren't supermen, they were alcoholics, and I mean just holding on by slender threads or invisible threads.
Dr. Bob always acknowledged that, at least, saying they were ordinary people doing extraordinary things under the guidance of God.
Yes. I think there's a story behind the story here. On the table here, we see some remnants of smoking in a machine to roll your own. And you guys, we're talking about back in 1935.
Yeah.
And what that is so significant about the history is Annie started smoking when she was 56. The kids, which by the way are on the wall as little kids, that was Sue and Smitty, thought it was beneath her to roll her own cigarettes. So the jokesters that they were, is they used to put pencil shavings in there instead of tobacco. And her eyesight was going at that point in time. She was starting to go blind, so to speak. Anyhow, she'd roll them up and those things would catch on fire and the kids just would howl. So everybody had a great sense of humor and didn't take themselves too serious.
They say she thought that Starbucks cigarettes taste better.
Yeah,
so great.
Absolutely.
So great.
Absolutely.
And there she is, the mother of AA.
That's what Bill called her. And
boy, without her, we wouldn't be here.
Yes.
You know?
And in this very room here, that's original. Can you imagine how many cigarettes were put out in that ashtray? The lamp is original.
Yes.
The Bible is original. But this is where Ann, an hour a day, when Bob was obviously here and Bill stayed for the 90 days, an hour a day, they would do the Oxford group about guidance, and then obviously the forerunner of step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God. And those are some of the titles that we have, and those were actually Dr. Bob's books. They were donated by his son Smitty.
And you'll see some more in there. And you notice like some of the things that really influenced and a part of this program that our founders read and shared. Sermon on the Mount, As a Man Thinketh, and the book of James. You know, Dr. Bob always said that prior to the writing of the big book, and I shouldn't even say prior, that our program was comprised of 3 influences. The book of James and the Holy Bible. Bill was so impressed with Annie's repetition of faith without works was dead, that he actually placed it in the big book.
Well, and that's how it used to be Works Publishing, and that's where it came from. Faith without works is dead.
And Corinthians 13 was another one, and also Sermon on the Mount. And that's a beautiful thing.
Actually, talking about the story behind the story, the reason that there are teapots up here, that was Annie's thing. She loved teapots. So we've got a pink one, we've got one on the mantle, and one over here. And also another thing that kind of goes along with the garage, as like a status symbol, if you will, gas logs. That's what they used to have, and most people at that juncture in time in life did not have that. Absolutely, positively, they did not have that.
That is Annie's Bible. I think you mentioned that, and that's so important for us. I think Annie, and many of us do believe this, it's obvious in the history of AA, she contributed much from her membership of the Oxford group to our practice of prayer and meditation.
Another fascinating thing about this lamp here, Dr. Bob wired it himself. Reason being, he was an insomniac and he was a great reader. He had over 300 titles, and he'd be up to all hours at night reading, and he rewired that. It's an old gas lamp, or not gas, or oil. You can see the container over here. But anyhow, he did that, and he was a voracious reader. He'd read at least an hour a day, sometimes 2 hours a day, and that's a tall order for anybody, but that's where he was at. And he had 2 great thirsts. One of them was for knowledge, and he got that through reading, and of course his other great thirst was Scotch. So that's
there you go.
That's how
he got spirituality, one spirit, alcohol, and then God, the power that has all power at the one. I love this.
Yes, go ahead.
And I'm going to have you do this one, but like Liberty magazine was the first time in 1939 that was published, and the first time by Morris Markey that Alcoholics Anonymous would get a little advertisement, a little known to the world, because we had to launch out. And the article was Alcoholics and God. But I love the story behind the story. When that magazine came out, it was told to me that Annie actually said, Dr. Bob couldn't wait to go to the corner to purchase it.
We went up to the drugstore and
Got
got
up to the
it.
drugstore, and Annie said, "Doc, we finally got respectable."
Kind of legit. In this Saturday Evening
And that
Post,
one-
that's the story behind the story for Alcoholics Anonymous. That's where we got 8,000 inquiries. Oddly enough, the tradition of anonymity was already there because Dr. Bob was referred to, I believe, as Dr. Armstrong.
Armstrong.
So, yeah, so I'm sure that he had a lot of aliases in the drinking days, but that's...
Yeah. Can I walk in here?
Oh, absolutely. This...
Oh, this is.
In this room here, history happened, and look at the ceiling in the woodwork of the time. That is a priceless amenity, if you will, and even with these here, I mean, it just speaks in itself. The spirit is alive and well, especially in this room.
Right here. Can I?
Yes, please do.
In December of 1939, Dr. Bob and the Akronites broke from the Oxford group. And their first meeting would be here. I won't say it, 859 Ardmore, right here. I believe there were 74 present.
I think it was 75 people, and it was around Christmas time, and
Because
they
there was
had
a Christmas tree.
They had a Christmas tree in there.
It was a Christmas tree.
Can you imagine having 75 people in a
And-
small house? The
and-
fire code was broken that day.
And
Yes.
Harmon, Henrietta Seigerling came.
She even came
She
over.
was
Yeah.
so loyal to us, and wives were here, and kids. That's from the sources. They say Dr. Bob. Could you imagine? I bet people were all over, in the kitchen, sitting down in the living room, just filled with hope, wondering where will they go now, what's going to happen, and they say Doc Bob stood right here.
And he actually, here's what they're saying, if we can, I know we're supposed to
Oh,
do
we're
this
going to
thing.
do it.
Well, yes, he actually
Yep.
sat down here,
He sat.
put his feet on like the rungs here,
Yep.
and opened up the meeting, and he of course used the Bible. A little bit of legend in Akron, Ohio, Northeast Ohio. They used to call the speaker of the meeting the leader of the meeting. It has been abridged to now you're going to lead a meeting, and that came from the Oxford groups. They had what was called testimony, or you would witness. That's how our story is disclosed in a general way, what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. So Dr. Bob, in this very room, that's how it started, and that's why the Bible was open up to that.
And you know, as you said, leadership, the whole giving his flock
Yeah.
leadership, so desperately needed at that time. We're going on to new territory now, and opened. It's just unreal. This is open to Sermon on the Mount.
And that's just a significant part of our
yeah.
history. On this very typewriter, we had 2/3 of the stories in the first edition of the Big Book came from Akron, Ohio.
Absolutely.
One of the members typed them on this very typewriter. This thing is priceless heirloom.
Priceless.
Not so much of being a typewriter, but what transposed of that. And this is Ernie's story on there, and that is was Sue, Dr. Bob and Annie's daughter, her first husband. And in this room itself, the whole story of the Smith family is in here, believe it or not. If we can see this, this is one of my favorite stories. This is a wedding invitation of Dr. Bob and Ann, and I'm going to go ahead and read this because it may be hard, and that's Annie. It said, Mr. Joseph Ripley will give in marriage her daughter, Ann Robinson, to Dr. Robert Holbrook Smith on the evening of Monday, the 25th of January, 1915, at 8:30. The address was on Maple Avenue, Oak Park, Illinois. The honor of your presence is requested. Now, who would get married on a Monday night? Oh, that's right. That was before Monday Night Football. I get it. At 8:15. And the story behind the story on this is, how did this is an actual, this is not a replica, it is an actual wedding.
Yes.
Who could have possibly saved that from back then, and we just got it in the house here within the last 5 years. Because you know how many wedding invitations we get it, and after you go to the reception, it goes to file 13. Right. There was no spiritual significance because Dr. Bob was just a regular old guy, no founder, no AA, none of that. Only in God's world could that thing have existed, and most importantly, only in God's world could it get back from there to home.
Yes.
In the year 2015 or however long we've had it. It's just, I just love that. It's just mind-boggling, and that's when they say this house is a house full of miracles. Not only the transformation of life's in here, but you wouldn't believe the miracles of the stories behind the stories.
And the miracles of the group of people that would be brought together. When I think of it, and I think most of us, we had an editor. You know, our need is God's opportunity, boy, huh?
Yes.
Absolutely.
So, this is one of my favorite rooms, boy, the miracles that happened in this room. This is the kitchen, and known as AA's church.
And in this room, this very room, Dr. Bob used to sit in this chair, and as the story would go, he would lean back, and if you were going to get in the refrigerator,
you had to move.
The good doctor had to get up. But what happened at this, in Dr. Bob's own words, in one of his last talks, I think maybe it was even in Detroit at 48, he said there was very rarely a night that they did not stay up till 2 or 3 in the morning, and this is where they literally hashed out the 12 steps. They would be up every night till 2 or 3 in the morning, and from this kitchen table and from these chairs, Bill was able to put them in writing in the infamous How It Works back in New York. But they actually came from this table. The potatoes here, there's a story behind the story on that. It was, don't forget, the Great Depression. The doctor, sometimes that's all that they had to eat. And also, it's been documented, some nights they would only have bread and milk.
Right.
That's how things were that tight, that close, however you want to call it. This story in itself is Kistler's Donuts. It was a bakery or donut shop here in Akron. In Northeast Ohio, many of the meetings still have donuts after or before the meeting, and the history comes from right here in Akron, Ohio. So many of our customs, if you will, in Alcoholics Anonymous, there's always a story behind the story, and that's what it is. And if you can notice this green, that is relevant to the time period and the flower wallpaper.
And you know about the potatoes, it's no coincidence that Alcoholics Anonymous would take root during a depression. The country was hopeless. The country, and it's just everything was in God, the right timing for something like this to flourish. When many, many people are hopeless, not just the alcoholic. We were always hopeless. And, I like a little thing behind those potatoes. They say that when the families would come here for a gathering, if they had a potluck, it was always a different dish of potatoes. No one had money. There was not any money. But yet they had love in their hearts. And they were able to spread that love to the world. Harmon, over a coffee pot.
Over a coffee pot.
We still do that.
Oh yeah,
today,
that's what I'm saying. I mean, that's the staple of Alcoholics Anonymous. On the counter here, this is a must.
Yes.
They used to have liquor live. This is a knockoff, but they had that for 2 reasons. Bill was insistent that we had to live in a world where alcohol was. He knew that. Either God removed the obsession or not. And they insisted to have it out front and center, not only to prove that point, but then also, with the new drunks coming in, they would have to taper them off, if you will, and so they wouldn't go to the DTs. That's a beautiful beautiful story in
And
itself.
they establish, I think, right on, it's in the big book.
Oh, yeah.
That any recovery program that shelters us from alcohol shelters us, hides us away, and is doomed to failure.
Doomed for failure.
In the big book.
Must talk about this. This is Sue and Smitty on the porch with Roger. Dr. Bob and Ann actually had 2 dogs. One of them was Roger, and one of them, you might be surprised by this name, his name was Scotch. Now, as it has, Roger is buried in the outside, and there's a...
Right here.
Yes, right alongside, and you can see Roger's bowl right there was food. So what it is the entire family. It wasn't just Dr. Bob. It wasn't Dr. Bob and Ann. It was Dr. Bob, Ann, Sue, Smitty, and even the family pet. And I'll show you what I mean. One of my most favorite parts of this house involves the dog. And like I said, my God, the spirit is alive and well when I walk in here. And I cannot tell you how many people have sat down at this table and have wept. I've seen the biggest, baddest, toughest men just crying like babies sitting down at this kitchen table. Because they know in the heart of hearts, this is where it all began.
And they still come from all over the world to sit at this table,
God, yeah.
to walk up those 12 steps.
That's why it is. Welcome home. It's their home. This is their home.
And I must say, even the liquor bottles there, filled with liquor, how it's in the big book. And they knew that. And it truly shows us how they wrote from their experience.
Hey,
He put it there. He insisted that we had to be able to put back into the world.
And thank God.
Yes.
He stayed here for 3 months.
Boy, thank God. The 2 co-founders, Harmon, could you imagine for the first, they didn't know what was ahead of them. They trusted God. We're sitting and walking right here. They were sober together. June 10th, 1930.
But they were so desperate. Can you imagine taking in strangers and Bill staying here for 3 months?
It
I tell you
only
what,
could be them.
he's lucky that Lois took him back. So
Yes.
She probably said,
How about it?
As you can see, we're going downstairs, and that would
Now this was found, one of my most favorite parts here, on the back of this door. Remember Roger?
Yeah.
I don't know if we can get down to see that, but you can see that when Roger was put down here, he wasn't happy with the new drunks, and or when Dr. Bob and Ann were disciplining Smitty and Sue. So you can see even the dog himself was displaced for the love of the alcoholic. I think this is one of the greatest pieces of history in this house because it's just so real and so alive. And my God, look how it's stayed from 1935 to 1950. I just can't begin to tell you what that means. I mean, that is the story of Alcoholics Anonymous, what happened in this home.
Roger's a little discontented, huh?
Restless, irritable, and discontent. Yeah, he was not a happy camper.
No, he wanted out. He wanted freedom.
Yeah.
Just like the drugs did. They found it here.
Okay.
Okay, here's our basement and the garage. Oh, Harmon, this is one of my favorite places.
Oh yeah.
I feel him here. Out of all the places in this home, I feel him so much here, his spirit. Let's turn some lights on. Harmon, I seem to feel him right here the most. If I stand here, it's like something just goes through me. If we just quiet ourselves maybe a minute. Boy, Harmon, he was a real man's man, wasn't he?
This was his man's cave, the original one. Dr. Bob loved cars. This is Smitty and Dr. Bob racing on the beach. Don't know who's in which car, but he loved cars. And as you can see these pictures of Dr. Bob,
Yes.
and that was, I believe, he was out in Yosemite.
Yes. They
Out
told
there.
him there.
And Dr. Bob himself, look at him here. He had his old, I believe, is that a Pierce
arrow, I believe that's it. This is a good snapshot of Dr. Bob. Look at his wild ties. He used to love that, but he just loved his cars. And this was his favorite. This was his last car. It's a Buick Roadmaster. Now, urban legend has it that that car is out somewhere in this country, still alive and well. If it is, I'm sure someday it will be back in this garage. And oddly enough, how it used to be, Dr. Bob used to have to back the car in here because that's the only way you could open the garage, the driver's door. Over there you couldn't do it. So can you imagine trying to back in that big car through that small way? He had to be a pretty good driver. You can imagine.
I bet he was happy too.
But I'm saying alcohol.
Especially
Can you
when he was
imagine how
drinking.
many scratches there is? Everything was probably
He
just tore up from
probably,
the floor.
he came right in here. The neighbors didn't have to see him, right? Oh, Lord.
Got a
And-
few scratches on this one.
Yeah, well, it was broken window. And Dr. Bob obviously was a smoker. There's so many times he's got a cigarette in his right hand there.
Yeah.
Here he's smoking, and like Dolly said, he was a man's man.
He was a man's man.
He obviously, here is catch there, avid tennis player, fisherman, horseshoes. Don't get
Yeah,
the
he
thing of
loved
horseshoes,
that.
you get beat. A golfer, and we forgot to say up in the
Cards.
yes, up in the table up there, there
Play
was a
cards.
deck of cards. He used to play, well, him and Annie used to play bridge together, but he belonged to a club, city club down in Akron, and he'd go down almost every day and play cards. He
And
was
the
a heck of a-
left-handed golf club.
Yeah.
Tell the story.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
left-handed
No, go ahead,
golf club.
left-handed.
No, you tell the story. Go ahead.
Well,
I-
that's...
That was a gift.
Yeah, that is a gift, and here's what it is about that. The left-handers, there's not too many left-handers in there, and Dr. Bob was always kind of backwards or ahead of his time both ways. It all depends how you look at
He
it.
learned how to do it.
Oh, he did that. And you can see, too, this was one of Dr. Bob's favorite places to hide bottles. When they were doing restoration, they found all kinds of them down here in the basement.
But these initials, if I may go back, now everyone has told me that that is Smitty.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone. And whatever. But there's a part of me that just thinks, and maybe, who knows, that maybe that was Doc Bob himself. I'm going to keep that thought.
Now,
this is the basement.
This is an important room over here. That is a time period washer. Now, I'm going to go ahead and bring up a little thing.
The story behind the washer.
Well, and they used to have a wringer dryer. I'll be darned, in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, he uses the word wringer twice. Where do you think it came from? It wasn't
Obviously.
horseshoes, the nip of the wringer, and if you get your fingers caught in there, you would lose them or break them.
And I could see how they pulled from the world to make it make sense to all of us. I'm sure they all knew what ringers were back then.
Absolutely. Because
Today they might not have.
Well, up the steps
To the second floor where the bedrooms
to
are.
the second floor.
A lot more than bedrooms, huh?
Yes, yes. Imagine the giants of AA.
There it
What's
is.
in this? Bill Wilson, Dr. Bob, Annie, Sue, Smitty, Archie. I mean, the first 100. Oh my God, yeah. I mean, like I said, if these steps could tell stories, we wouldn't have enough time.
And here's the bathroom. Harmon, Dr. Bob's story again is going to come alive. Huh?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
In here, well, every alcoholic knows that there's no more spirituality than the bathroom, especially when you're drinking. This room in Dr. Bob's nightmare is referred to more than any other room in itself. The bathroom.
There's bottles.
Dr. Bob used to hide bottles, pretty ingenious, down the clothes chute down.
Absolutely.
Ergo, what in the laundry basket down there, the bottle. So they're all tied together.
I think if you put your hand in here, look at there's a ledge
Oh
over here.
yeah, oh yeah. You left no stone unturned, and that's a great story about how
Love the
the bottles used to come. Then also,
tugboat Annie story.
yes, about he used to hide them in the socks. That's why the sock is there,
Right.
because he used to hide the bottle in his sock when he
And
goes
he
to
caught
shower.
on to that.
Yeah, it went rolling down the hill. That was probably at the Civic. And then also, too, don't forget Prohibition. Dr. Bob had what was, we know he has the bootlegger, and he used to throw the alcohol up.
Would
there,
actually
too.
throw it up there.
Yeah, isn't that beautiful? What is the original linoleum floor? For general purposes, this is roped off from the public because we want to keep it.
We want to keep.
Now, talking about if rooms and things could talk, this floor, this used to be the surrender room. They used to bring them in here.
Yes.
It looks like we're sloppy housekeepers, but not so. Dr. Bob had books everywhere.
Everywhere.
And that's why the books are there. And like I said, he was like an insomniac and be up to late and reading 2 hours. I know I said it before, but that's the epitome of Dr. Bob, who he was and what he was. And this dress here is just a snapshot of how humble and how she just didn't want any pretense, didn't want to have anything brought to her attention. In fact, they used to have New Year's dances, and she would not wear a new dress because she said it might make the newcomers, talking about the wives of the newcomer, feel embarrassed because they didn't have enough clothes, and she refused to, doll up or do
She
anything.
practiced the 4 absolutes. How would it affect the other woman?
That's absolutely,
Boy, beyond measure.
absolutely beautiful. And this is one of my favorite things too. Bill Wilson got this. He was over in Ireland, of all places. See the potatoes in
Look
Ireland,
at
of
the
all
year
places.
on it.
Yes. This was given from the Dublin group to Dr. Bob. And it happened to be the same year that he died. This was in 1950. That's why this is here, because this was Dr. Bob's, and he absolutely treasured that.
Yeah.
And his partner, Bill Wilson, brought it all the way back from Dublin. It's Dr. Bob's. In fact, there's an inscription on here. We're going to go ahead and see this. And it's his initials, RHS, Dublin, June of 1950. And we know that he died shortly thereafter in November of 1950. So he was gravely ill when Bill brought this back. That is one of my favorites as well.
Oh, yeah. And original items here.
Yeah.
The bed, the dresser, nightstand. We are so blessed. Yes.
I mean, each room, like Paul said about our recovery, our sobriety, each room kind of in a way just keeps getting better and better.
Paul told us that was going to happen.
Yeah, and it happens. But I just love this linoleum floor. I just can't
They
begin to
slept
tell you.
here.
Yeah, it's just...
Both of them.
Yeah.
Do us, if you like, with this. No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I want you to.
I want you to. Go ahead, please. Please.
I'll do it.
Go.
Okay.
Since
Do it.
who else should do this? Go ahead, dear. Oh, I'll make you look good. Don't worry. Don't put that.
Look up there.
Okay.
In 1947, Bob and Ann were up here. They hear a knock on the front door. And they go down. And there on the front steps is this guy. I forget what his name is. His name was, it's not here, he's anonymous. But he had what was a wire recorder. And this was the technology of the day. It recorded audio. This is the iPod of 1947. It recorded on this little wire. And he asked Dr. Bob, he says, hey, I'm on my way up to New York to visit Bill Wilson. Would you like to send him a message? And he said, well, that sounds like a good idea, And so he brought the machine up here, just like this very machine, and he set it down on that floor right there. Ann was in bed. She was convalescing after a surgery, I believe. And he handed her the microphone, and that was recorded right there. And it's the only known recording of Ann's voice. Might be beyond the scope of this.
Robert wants me to start first.
You can hear it. You can come to the house and hear it in person. But it was recorded right there. Then she handed the microphone to Smitty. And then Smitty recorded a little bit of a burn on his father. It was clear from the recordings that they were a fun-loving group. You can hear the personality come through. They were not about poking each other in the ribs a little bit. And then they handed it over to Dr. Bob. He recorded his minute and 20 seconds. And the guy packed up his machine, he got in his car, and he drove to New York, where he did the same thing with Bill Wilson, and he recorded Bill Wilson's voice. We have that here, 2 minutes and 9 seconds worth. And we have a minute and 14 of Bill playing the violin, which is the only known recording of Bill actually playing the violin. And it's a beautiful thing. We have the original wires right here. Nice. It was donated to the house a couple of years ago by a great benefactor of the house. And the beautiful part about this whole story is that this is 1947. They could have just picked up the phone and called each other. But on account of one alcoholic going out of his way, showing off his new toy,
wow,
we are able to have this permanent recording of Ann's voice and Bill on the violin, and this glimpse, this off the record glimpse. This is not standing in front of a podium. This is by the bedside kind of glimpse, and it's before the and I think he's even this is before the traditions, and there was even a mention of that's coming down the road, and the thought process behind it a little bit. So it's a beautiful thing when fate comes together with a little service.
Yes.
And the labor of love, because that's before the Eisenhower interstate system. So to go from Akron to New York was a major pain. It's still today driving now. It's still a major pain, but back then, talking about willing to go to any lengths, and they would travel back and forth as much as possible, and they just loved each other.
Is there any way we could hear Bill play the violin? We could hear him and his deep love for the Smith family, because he certainly expresses it.
Take a picture over here. Move in on that a little bit.
We're not going to have a violin solo tonight. Don't let yourself.
And that was the gift of music that Bill sent back to the Smiths. So long, dear people. We'll be seeing you soon.
Yes. Language of the heart. Okay, Smitty's room. A lot of early AAs surrendered in this room. In fact, I love to see, and you see the sauerkraut, the tomatoes. They used that to detox alcoholics, so they said a few years later they found out it really did work.
But that's what they had at that time.
That's what they had. Go ahead.
So much happened in this room. This is the room where Bill and Dr. Bob spent the night at 4 o'clock. Dr. Bob rolled over to his partner, Bill Wilson, and said, I'm going to go through with it.
Yeah.
Bill said, what, with the surgery? And he said, yes, that, and I'm going to go through the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, because he was hesitant to do the amends portion, and he drank again on the Atlantic City Convention. Beautiful. Beautiful.
So he made that decision right here.
He made that decision
he
right here.
He never drank again.
He never drank again. Talking about we stood at the turning point. Yep. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. This is Sue's bedroom, and as you can see, a teenager at that time. Obviously, this was the thing to do, starstruck, if you will. Edgar Riley, this guy right here, stayed in this room. This happens to be a book signed by Sister Ignatia. I don't know if it'll come through. That's priceless. Now, Edgar Riley was a special case. He and his wife and kids actually stayed in this room. She supposedly revealed that she had some extra relations outside of the marriage, and he roughed her up. And that's why
Step
we hear in
9.
Step 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. And there's some truth to that. But the real story about Edgar was he was quite a character. He slid down the drain pipe. Can you imagine the neighbors seeing an alcoholic sliding down the drain pipe? He actually had probably some other things going. Annie served tuna fish. He took issue with that, didn't like tuna fish, and was chasing Annie around with a butcher knife. Bill happened to be in the house at that time. Ann was on her knees saying the Lord's Prayer, and Bill physically took the butcher knife out of Edgar's hand. He had to leave, he wasn't sober, but when Dr. Bob died, you'll never guess who showed up at his funeral sober.
17 years sober.
Edgar Riley, isn't that absolutely amazing?
And would we like to do a third step prayer?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and this is where it is. I mean, we're now at step 3. God,
I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Release me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always.
Help me out,
I
right?
launched out from here.
Well, and it is that, but that's me, so let me see, where were the lights? Did we leave them off?
Okay. They
Okay.
both came from Vermont, the two co-founders.
This is referred to the Vermont room
Oh, yeah.
when the drunks would come in, they call them UD, unknown drunks. Smitty and Sue knew before they walked in the house they'd have the smell of formaldehyde, and they knew somebody wasn't going to be sleeping in the room. Smitty a lot of times would go in this room, and we'll close up with that one. Sue would end up with a couch, would end up on the couch. Both Dr. Bob and Smitty were in this crib. So people say, okay, it's a crib. There is no way in the world that this stuff could have gotten from Akron, Ohio, down to Texas, down to or over to Tennessee, back to Akron, Ohio, other than God and His providence. We didn't even know these things existed. But the things that have come home, when we say it's home, it's home. There is no way in anybody's wildest imagination that these things could have come back. There is no way.
Gravely ill.
Bill Wilson knew it, and he was coming here when that started.
But this takes place in November of 1950 because he dies a week later at noon the following Thursday. So you could kind of say Bill Wilson last visited Dr. Bob in November of 1950.
It was their final goodbye.
It was-
As it is written, the final farewell on this side is going to meet again. In November 1950, Dr. Bob was gravely ill, and Bill knew this probably would be the last time he'd see him. Dr. Bob had a very serious surgery.
I went down the steps and then turned to look back. Bob stood in the doorway, tall and upright as ever. He was my partner, the man with whom I never had a hard word. The wonderful old broad smile was on his face as he said almost jokingly, "Remember, Bill, let's not louse this thing up. Let's keep it simple." I turned away, unable to say a word. That was the last time I ever saw him. Dr. Bob died at noon the following Thursday, November 16th, 1950. Pass it on, Bill Wilson.